Thank you for tuning in to the Jude 3 podcast. We're on our second episode. If you heard the first one, we're on a series called Theodicy and Hip Hop. Theodicy encompasses the problem of evil. Basically, how can evil exist in a world where God is present, who is all knowing, all powerful, all loving, all good? How can those things evil and that type of God coexist? So we want to deal with that problem. I have a very special guest, Pastor Jonathan Bennett, who's a part of the Jude 3 Project. He's a pastor in Richmond, Virginia at Cornerstone Baptist Church. He is also graduating with me on May 9th from Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary with his Master's of Arts in Theological Studies. So welcome to the podcast, John.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So this week we're gonna kind of tag on to what we discussed last week. We discussed Jay-Z and Sun Cry and how he raised the problem when he talked about his nephew killed in a car accident and how it tested his faith. And he said some things can't be explained, what caused it. And so in light of that, we raised the problem of evil, but we had a question in light of his question: how do we define evil? Because we live in a society with relative standards, so everybody has their own truth. And if my truth is this and your truth could be that, as long as, that's how we tolerate each other. We say, well, that's your truth. Well, however, if evil is going to exist, there has to be absolute truth. And we want to kind of define what truth is in light of that. So, and what evil is, because we can't define evil, or we can't say that evil is a problem without defining it first. What is evil? And so we developed a definition. Evil is a transgression of God's moral standard. And evil has to have an absolute truth to be rooted in. Don't you agree, John?
Oh, I definitely agree there. Like, it has to be, like you were saying, it has to have the absolute truth to be rooted in, because if you're saying that there is an evil, then there has to be a good. And as you were stating earlier, the old argument of if there's a good, then it has to be this way, a moral law by which to differentiate, which dictates a moral lawgiver. And so really the one necessitates the other there.
So what we want to bring in, or what song we want to use, is J. Cole, apparently. We all know that J. Cole is a socially conscious rapper, more socially conscious than a Lil Wayne, a Birdman. But we're going to play a little clip that I found interesting in his song, apparently off his new album, 2014, Forest Hill Drive.
This is my canvas. I'ma paint it how I want it, baby. This is my canvas. I'ma paint it how I want it. Because there is no right or wrong, only a song. I like to write alone, me and my.
And so the lyric that stood out to me in that was, there is no right or wrong, only a song. And J. Cole, in other songs, he has a lot of socially conscious lyrics. But this stood out to me because if you want to believe there's no right or wrong, then you can't say anything is wrong.
Yeah.
It contradicts everything. It contradicts every social stance you want to take. You've kind of just laid it out. There's no right or wrong. So how is there evil if right or wrong doesn't exist?
I think it's a great question. And what you hit on right there is perfect. It's like, intrinsically, we all know that there has to be right or wrong. Like, say that there is no right or wrong to the person who just lost a family member through murder, or say that there is no right or wrong to somebody who was just raped. To say there is no right or wrong to anybody who's suffered injustice, or to Ferguson, Missouri, try to say that down there, it doesn't fit socially. You know what I'm saying? So it's like we know that isn't true. Geisler, he tries to lay out an argument for really three ways to handle what we labeled as earlier as the problem of evil. He says it's the atheistic way, that kind of affirms evil and denies God. And then there's this pantheistic way that kind of affirms God and denies evil. And this is what J. Cole seems to be getting at. He doesn't deny God. In fact, he affirms God. Earlier on in the song, he says, I ask the Lord to follow me. And so, like, J. Cole's problem isn't that he doesn't believe in a God, but that he sees so many gods. Like, God is everything. He has this pantheistic mindset. Pantheism is like this thing where literally God is in everything. God is in the wall. God is in the chair. God is in the tree. God is in me. Everything is God. The only problem with that is that if God is in everything and everyone is God, then nothing can be evil, because then evil would be God. And so, like, by default, the two cancel each other out. And so if, in order to accurately handle the problem of evil, it's not that we have to find a God, but we have to find the God. And once we can get people to see that there's not just many gods, and all of these gods can equally tell us what's right and wrong, and everybody can make up their own moral code, but there has to be the one true God who stands alone with his own moral code. And now there can be objective morality that kind of transcends culture, transcends time, transcends opinion even. And that way we can kind of differentiate between right and wrong. It's interesting that pantheism, as we said earlier, affirms God and denies evil. Atheism affirms evil and denies God. Only theism and true theism affirms both God and evil. It seems like everyone else tries to take a shortcut, as if to say, we'll just do away with God and solve the problem, or we'll just do away with evil, when both parties seem very relevant and necessary to the discussion. Only theism says we'll take the burden of taking both God and evil, and we'll hash out a way to make sure that the two exist together in harmony. And theism does a good job of that.
So the problem is the problem of evil. There is a problem with the problem of evil, because from man's perspective, the problem is God, and from God's perspective, the problem is man. Because we can't define evil unless we agree that there's absolute moral standards of right or wrong. Then we have to, once we define that, who gives those moral standards? So then that leaves us to, there must be a moral lawgiver, which is essentially going to lead to the existence of God. So then it's not man looking up, it's God looking down, because God makes the rules. So we have a problem with, I guess, the way he structures the rules as far as right or wrong. Am I making sense?
No. You're making perfect sense. Yeah. And that becomes the problem in our minds. And so many people, because of that, kind of want to just distance themselves away from it and take the pantheistic route and say, you know what, we're all God. Let's all put ourselves on the level of God, so that we can all kind of define right and wrong, good and evil on our own. But that only leads us further down the trail to the problem, as you said, of the problem of evil.
Because then if everybody determines what right or wrong is, then right or wrong can't really be defined. Because if John says something right and I say that's wrong, but I say we both get to decide, then we cancel each other out. And so,
you know what?
Go ahead.
What's interesting is two things that came to mind. There was around December, really November, Toys R Us had this Breaking Bad doll that came out, and they were selling it in the stores, and the guy was selling crystal meth, like the toy that was being sold at Toys R Us marketed for kids was being sold with crystal meth, and parents were outraged across America, and it seemingly, like, oddly enough, they came like this group of people who kind of came alongside of it. They were saying, you know what, maybe they have every right to sell it. And America became divided over this issue. Is it okay to sell a doll that has crystal meth to kids? Is it not okay to sell a doll that has crystal meth to kids? I mean, it means the toy crystal meth, but still. And it was like, how do we decide this issue? And they decided it off of popularity. It was like, who makes the most noise off of social media? And sadly, in this generation, like, right and wrong isn't being defined or decided by God. It's being decided by how many people we can get to back our opinion on it. And that kind of thinking leads us down a deadly road.
Mm-hmm. Popularity decides right or wrong
Yeah,
versus a God that gives the law. So if there's a God that gives the law, that means we have to submit to him, whether we like his rules or not. And that comes with, you know, the different things we don't like about God's rules. His rules on sexuality, his rules on um, lying, his rules on gossiping. Those rules, those moral standards he gives, we don't always like. So when we don't like them, we shift and say, okay, well, I want to make my own rules. And then we go on the slippery slope because we we define right or wrong in relative terms, and then we get
mm,
mad because of what God allows that could be potentially that we consider evil, but we've denied evil by saying that we get to define the terms. So you
yeah,
create a bigger problem with the actual problem of evil, and then you don't even know that you've created the problem. I don't even think J. Cole is conscious of the the fallacy that he's creating with his lyrics. I don't think it's a conscious thing, but it's something we do to pacify how we view things, or when we make emotional decisions, or when we decide ethics based on our feelings. So
yeah.
we say your truth and my truth, and that's why I really think that that whole my truth and your truth is so damaging and deadly, because pushed to its extreme, we have no right or wrong
Yeah,
in
that is
society,
so real.
and we can't define evil, and so we don't think about it, we just say it, and then it's like, well, then you go to something like the problem of evil, and then you're like, well, based on your foundation for truth, it's relative, so you have no foundation to, or any reason to be mad at God when truth is relative.
Yeah,
So the problem is that the problem of evil doesn't exist based on your own guidelines of what truth is.
that is real. You know what's crazy is he goes on in his song to say, "Think back to Forest Hill. There's no perfect home, but the only thing that I like home I've ever known, until they snatched it from my mama and foreclosed her on a loan." Like he goes down the rest of the song and begins to talk about how he was done wrong. But the crazy thing is he's robbed himself of the right to say that anything's wrong. Like he's robbed himself of the ability to say that anything's evil when he said it earlier that there's a plethora of gods, or that there's many gods, and then that there is no right or wrong. And so it's like you can't have it both ways. It's too duplicitous in his song.
Yeah, yeah. And so we just want you to think critically through this issue of the problem of evil, because I don't think we think about it enough. We say, well, God, why did you allow this to happen? Well, what are the standards of which you bring decide what's true, what's right or wrong? Um, if you have a relative perspective, and a lot of us do in church or outside of church, then it's going to be hard for you to make these claims. Truth has to be absolute. Now, in the following episodes, we're gonna actually deal with some potential solutions to define the problem of evil, the free will argument in Christianity, the greater good argument as well, are two big arguments. Does God give us free will to decide? If there's free will, obviously evil has to exist, because we can't have free will and evil not exist. That's a consequence. If I give you a choice to do good or evil, then you might decide to do evil. So evil is birthed from the free will of man. Or there's the greater good argument, would suggest that God is using everything to bring about this greater
Getting
good.
good. Yeah.
The Joseph argument, you meant it for evil, but God turned it around for good. So we're going to be dealing with those perspectives, but we just want to kind of lay the groundwork and say, what is evil? We believe at Jude 3 that evil is the transgression of God's moral law. So that means that God's law is the absolute truth, and the Bible is the absolute truth in which we ground what right or wrong is, what good and evil is. So, come on this journey with us as we wrestle. We're not going to solve it in all of these episodes. The problem of evil is something that people wrestle with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pages. Scholars bump heads on this issue all the time. So we're We're not going to solve it, but we just want to expose you to your own thoughts and your own ways that you kind of create a greater problem with the relative truth and this saying my truth and your truth. So
Yeah.
we look forward to you going on this journey with us. If you missed the first episode, you can check it out on our website at jude3project.com. Find us on Twitter at jude3project, on Instagram at jude3project, and on facebook.com/jude3project.